Everybody, good morning from Strasbourg, from myself. My name is Matthias Gruden. I'm the Director of Democratic Participation, and I'm a moderator together with our friend and partner, Anna Perona-Fjellstad, Director of the European Wergeland Center, who's with us from Oslo. Welcome to this launch of a Signpost teacher training model on teaching about religions and non-religious worldviews in intercultural education. With us as panelists, I would also like to welcome Ms. Haldis Margrete Holst, who is the Deputy General Secretary of Education International, Mr. Villano Kyriazi, Council of Europe Special Coordinator in the Director General of Democracy, Dr. Angelos Valianatos, European Wergeland Centers and Council of Europe expert and co-author of the manual from Greece, Dr. Kevin O'Grady, also European Wergeland Center and Council of Europe expert and co-author of the manual from the United Kingdom, and finally, Dr. Peter Scheiner, Director of the Comenius Institute in Germany. So I will speak as little as possible, I promise, because we have these prominent guests, and we would also like to have to give opportunity to participants to ask questions. I would just like to say I'm very excited to come to this point where we are launching this manual, which is a result of many years of work on both in the Council of Europe and the Wergeland Center. It has started in many ways in 2008 when the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe adopted recommendation on the religious and non-religious convictions within intercultural education. And it has been, I think, brought to another level with the connection that we have managed to make, and this Signpost teacher training module manual is making with the flagship Council of Europe project, the reference framework for competencies for democratic citizenship, which really, I think, helps to give means and ways and methodology and practical application to the very important principles that have been developed in that Committee of Ministers recommendation. What has also been, of course, extremely important in that journey was the cooperation between the European Wergeland Center and the Council of Europe. And I think it has helped to reinforce what has always been the strength of the Council of Europe work in the area of education, and that is direct involvement, participation, contribution of course, government representatives, but also in particular experts and education professionals. I think that one thing that makes the Council of work in the area of education standing out is that we always work very closely and learn in many ways from education professionals, from teachers, school principals, professors, that also help us make the final output of our work something that is useful, that is relevant, that is topical, and is implementable. And I think we are going to be discussing a very good example and illustration of this kind of output. So that would be from me, and I pass the floor now to Anna. Thank you.
Thank you, Matthias, and good morning to all of you from Oslo. The material we are going to present to you today is the result, as Matthias said, of a long cooperation with the Council of Europe. But I would like to make one point. Why is this area important for the Wergeland Center? And I have to say, because it is connected to the very birth of the center. Back in 2005, the Council of Europe was exploring the possibility of establishing a center to bridge educational policy and educational practice. And they commissioned Professor Robert Jackson from the University of Warwick a feasibility study to explore the mandate of the center, a center that could be on intercultural education with a focus on religious and non-religious worldviews, or with a slightly broader mandate and including connecting intercultural education to democracy and education on human rights. This was the final choice, and this was what it became later, Wergeland Center. So the topic has been really important for us from the very beginning, and we hope that we will continue working with this in the future. Before going to the panelists, some practical messages. We would like to encourage you to send us questions. They will be in your right of your screen in the Q&A sections. We have a team following these, and the questions will be posted to the panelists at the end of the session. This session is going to be recorded as well, and it will be broadcast live on Facebook and also in our YouTube channel if you want to recommend someone to watch it later. And from 11 to 11:30, there will be an interactive session where we would like to invite you to discuss with us next steps. With this in mind, Matthias, back to you.
Well, thank you very much, and I will, as I said, keep my promise of keeping my intervention as short as possible. I just also like to flag how topical that, of course, training model and manual is in today's times. We are dealing with issues and situations and challenges that teachers are facing across Europe every day, in schools across Europe every day. And I really think that I'm very excited that we're coming to a point where we can help the teachers with assistance, support that has been in many, to a large extent, prepared by teachers. But I think it's much better that now I give the floor to somebody who is really the main author and also behind the idea, who will be presenting us the tool through a practice example. So I give the floor to Dr. Angelos Valiniatos, as I said, Bergelen Center Culture Europe expert and a co-author of the manual. So Angelos, to you.
Thank you. Let me upload my presentation. That will help me invite you in what the Signposts teacher training module is. Well, on the title we have navigating, we have controversial issues of religious worldviews, and I'll try to say why it is controversial and why we need to navigate. From the many issues that we deal with in intercultural education is the religious issues, and one of the main problems that we face is if religion is a private or a public issue. Well, in most of the Council of Europe member states, religion becomes more and more a private issue. This means that religion is in the houses, is in the minds of the people, and this shadows, in a way, the issue of the religion in the public. So religion can be found either in homes, individually. I'm not sure if all the people know how people are linked to religion in their neighborhood, and also in the local communities where people know each other, but that's all. We don't deal with religion, or we were not dealing with religion more than this. What happens in the classroom? We have a variety of different educational systems in the Council of Europe member states. It's either one religion teaching, confessional sometimes, mostly Christianity, and or Islam, if there are people and the educational system allows it, or ethics parallel to religion, or nothing about religion at school. And this is mostly all that we deal with religion in schools. But in the classroom, the students bear with them the religion of their family. They're not representatives of their religion, but they are a member of the community. Either they have a religion, or they have a non-religious conviction, or they don't deal with that. And this is a fact that happens in every classroom, no matter what the religious education system of our country is. So this has left religion to religious education at schools, and we don't deal in schools more than that. Till the beginning of the century, that we had incidents that does not let religion be a private issue anymore. It is terrorism using religion that makes it very sound. Still religion is there, but now there is another front coming from outside of the school. Starting from 2002, after 9/11, the Council of Europe has started investigating ways to deal with religion at school, because the big need was to create a mutual understanding between people. In 2008, we have the recommendation 2008-12, which is on how to deal with religions and non-religious convictions within intercultural education. And this gives a way to deal with religion regardless the religion education, regardless more than the official or the prevailing religion of the country. Deal more with the religious feeling of the people. 6 years later, the Signposts, Policy and Practice for Teaching about Religion and Non-Religious Worldviews in Intercultural Education, was a publication and outcome of the hard work of a team that tried to convey the recommendation to the member states, to explain what we can do with religion. And now, 6 years later, we have the teacher training module, which means Signposts and their recommendation in practice, in teacher training action. This is what we launched today. Who is that for? It is for policymakers under certain circumstances. It is to inspire them of how to deal with religion in these educational systems. It is to put some rules in teacher training education. Mostly it is for teacher councils, because what we deal with is how the school works with the religion as a whole system, and also to teacher students, the future teachers that should feel more secure to deal with those issues. But mainly it is for teachers through their teacher training, but also for themselves if they want to find some data, information and help about those issues. This means that this module is 18+. It is for adults. It's not something that you take and let students do, but it's something that you are trained and help you with the students in the classroom. How is it structured? The Signpost, the original, has actually 9 chapters that we can deal with. So the module has 9 chapters, each chapter a different color, depending on the original text. The first part is the key point. The key point is a summary of what the Signposts and the recommendation says about this issue in bullets, so that we are informed of what are the issues that this chapter of Signposts deals with. And then it's a reference to the CDC, to the competence of democratic culture. What do you need in order to approach this issue? The third thing is, knowing that religion is a controversial issue today, how can you manage to deal with the controversial issues that arose when you deal with religion at school? Then the next part has 4 fundamental questions. This issue that we study and we want to get trained about, how does it affect me as a person? Second, how does it affect my teaching? What can I do now? And what do I need to develop in order to face it in a better way in the future? After this study and investigation and information and possibilities, then we go to the activities. The module has a series of different activities structured in the following way. The focus of the activity, some tips for the trainer, what are the objectives, why to do it, what competencies are dealing with, step by step how you do every activity, and then how to debrief it, to evaluate it, and speak about the follow-up. And then it's the activity itself. This is one of the examples, with all detailed steps, questions, material, and everything. Let's use an example. This seems to be a safe classroom. Let's suppose that the teacher is a mathematician, and he follows the constructivistic ways that give space to the students to deal with mathematics. But the thing is that at the same time, every student has his or her own religious identity inside. And the teacher has his or her too. Is there a problem? Does the teacher see all the students equally without his own religious or non-religious worldviews interfering to the way that he sees his or her students? Or we have a math class, but something happens in the community and the students coming in the school want to discuss about it. How much does the teacher feel safe to deal with it? What does he or she need? What information, what tools, up to what extent, in what way to deal with it? What he can do is to turn to the module through training before that, but also himself or herself. And let's go to chapter 5, the classroom as a safe space. We'll go through the process. The first part, key point, says that teachers should be non-judgmental, unbiased, have rules for the participation. They have to be comfortable with conflict, supportive and respectful. This is what you can find in Signposts about this. Then he goes to the CDC, to the butterfly. And there are certain skills, attitudes, knowledge, and of course values that he has to work on that in order to feel safer. And then the teacher has to feel secure that he knows in advance that religious and worldview difference can often arouse strong emotions or can raise controversy. And he or she has to be prepared to manage discussion in order to go through the religious issue in his classroom in the math lesson. Then he goes to the 4 questions. How does this affect me? I have to be sensitive to the present of different around me. It's not necessarily sure that all teachers are sensitive to the difference, any kind of difference, but religious too. Or to have peaceful ways of managing controversy. And then my teaching means that I have to know that I don't give a final answer that is 100% the answer. I have to know that there are final answers that may be unreachable. And then what can I do? At first, I can have rules in the classroom so I can manage a discussion in a way that is easy for every student to express their opinion. And then to share it with the colleagues in order to have a religion policy at school. How do we deal with those issues? And he or she has to develop the thought of how the classroom is and what he or she uses in the class in order to deal with those issues. Then it's the activity. In the module, the trainer can find activities that will say how to go from part to part. What kind of activities are there? There are activities that you can choose from. There are 5 activities there, you can choose 1. You can choose 1 step of those because you don't have enough time or you have only 1 session. Or you can use them all and have a year-long training in school or in service training or pre-service training or to teach your students. The activities can be shortened. You can make them small events or you can lengthen them because you have time and you want to deal with a certain issue more in depth. More in depth is another way of dealing with activities. 1 activity for as long time as it needs in order to go deep in the bottom. How to know all this? At the beginning of the module, there is a chapter with the guidance notes that addresses to the teacher trainer and the user and giving paths of how to use this module, how to choose things, how to combine things, how to use an activity that is in chapter 1 for chapter 9, and so on and so forth. I've said from the beginning that the module is for policymakers, teacher councils, teacher students, and teachers. But the way to use the model is to use it as a mirror of reality, of the educational reality that we all face. To be able and to be ready, to get in those issues and feel safe to deal with them, because they happen, because they occur, because it is in the students' minds. So I hope that this tool will be welcomed and used, and I wish you to enjoy it. Thank you.
Thank you, Angelos, for giving us a glimpse of what we can find in Signposts. It is a very hands-on tool for teachers by teachers. Thank you very much. And I would like to move to Villano now. In 2017, Villano, Angelos came to you with an idea. You were then the head of the Educational Policy Division. And you decided to support this idea that later became this publication. Why did you do that? What do you see could be the added value of this tool?
Yeah, thank you, Anna, for the invitation and for the question. I would like to say from the beginning that the answer to this question lies first of all in the very mission and the political agenda of an organization like the Council of Europe. As you all well know, the Council of Europe mission is to strengthen unity among its members by promoting human rights, pluralism, democracy, rule of law. Secondly, it is closely linked to the specific role played by the education sector in responding adequately to this mission while contributing at the same time to the development of educational policy at European level. And third, is also linked to the very value of multilateral cooperation and the responses such cooperation is able to provide to challenges in our societies. Among the multitude of policy objectives that are pursued by the Council of Europe over the last 2 decades in the education and in other sectors, I would like to mention 3, as they are very relevant to our discussions today and reflect very well the part that was played by the education in the political agenda of the organization. So it is about living together as equals in dignity. A second one is connected with the building of inclusive societies in Europe. And the third one is connected with the reinforcement of democratic security through the reinforcement of democratic institutions and the development of a culture of democracy. So these 3 objectives have been at the center of the work of the Council of Europe in education over the last 20 years. So the action began with the teaching of history and languages, continued afterwards with the intercultural education, then education for democratic citizenship, and has now led to a program line related to education for democracy. And as it was mentioned also by Matthias, the director that covers all these areas, the new reference framework for competencies for democratic culture is the centerpiece of this program right now. If I go a little bit back in the history of the why, after the events of 11 September 2001 in the United States and their analysis and public discussions worldwide, the Council of Europe education sector took seriously the need to look at and engage with the role of religions and other worldviews in Europe. And so if before the question of religious or religious education or education about religions, etc., was considered as a private issue, for the first time in the European debate in education. So this issue became a public issue that deserves specific attention by all. So several activities, a group of projects started in 2002, and then a project group, and then several activities were organized, several conferences from 2003 to 2008. I can remember a ministerial conference in Athens in 2003 that started all the activities in connection with intercultural education, etc. But also other activities in 2000. Let's say in 2004, we were in Oslo in a very important conference that has this theme as a major theme. And in 2008, the major result of this first project carried out by the education sector was, as Angelos just showed, the adoption by the Committee of Ministers of a recommendation on the dimension of religions and non-religious convictions within intercultural education. So the recommendations adopted by the Committee of Ministers in the Council of Europe we consider them as soft law. They are not conventions. They don't have a mandatory, let's say, power, but they should be implemented in national context and by our member states on a voluntary basis. The recommendations underline the need to promote knowledge and understanding of specific religions and non-religious convictions, because, the starting point was the need for learners to be able to interpret religious practices and manifestations, to understand the diversity of religions and the diversity within religions, and relations and interactions between religions and cultures. So the recommendation uses taken into account the diversity of Europe and the diversity of the education system. So the common denominator that was taken as a starting point by the recommendation was the notion or the concept that religions and non-religious beliefs may at least be considered as cultural facts. So in that way, we managed to bring all member states together and work on these issues. Otherwise, it would have been impossible to make them work together. And intercultural education was selected and was chosen and considered as the best approach to managing religious diversity in the light of the Council of Europe fundamental values. So at the end of this first decade, if we look at the multilateral cooperation, then we have also a very important development, as you mentioned, Anna, at the beginning of this session, the establishment in 2008 of an important mechanism for multilateral cooperation in Europe, alongside the Committee on Education Policy and Practice of the Council of Europe. So the Wergeland Resource Center was set up in Oslo with the extremely difficult task of bridging the gap between policy development and effective implementation of new educational practices in the classroom or in schools in Europe. After more than 10 years, I believe that the center has made a significant contribution to this goal. And among the wide range of actions and programs, the center has decided to set up jointly, immediately after the creation of the center, a Council of Europe and Wergeland Center joint group with the task of evaluating the implementation of the recommendation. So a European survey was launched. 37 member states took part in a survey that had two aims: to evaluate the level of intercultural awareness within each education system of our member states, but also a second aim was to explore the level of implementation of such a recommendation. So the results show that a large number of member states were actively engaged in intercultural education. However, several issues were still outstanding with regard to the religious dimension, like, for example, confusion with regard to terminology, the quality of teaching, and the lack of competencies of teachers in order to appropriately deal with religious diversity and controversial issues in the classroom, or media representations of religion, or the whole school approach with regard to this issue, or the relationship of school with the community, etc. So Signposts, the first document, was the document which resulted from this work, and it was meant to assist policymakers, schools, teacher trainers in using the recommendations. So the title of the document, Signposts, is very appropriate because it expressed the intention to facilitate discussion and action by users in member states. After a series of events with stakeholders in different countries, a new need soon emerged, and this need was very much connected to the practice in the classroom and to teachers. So there was a need for teachers to assist them in the classroom and to face new challenges in the second decade from 2000 until now, 2020. So Europe, during this last 10 years, has experienced new forms of violence and extremism in many countries, leading to acts of terrorism. Education was also called upon, of course, to contribute to the efforts of prevention of radicalizations and violence, etc. So the democratic security of our society became a major objective during this second period of cooperation in the education field. And so the education sector of the organization and the Wergeland Center focused their efforts, among other initiatives, of course, in two important elements. One was mentioned before, which is a major and very ambitious one, is the elaboration of a reference framework of competencies for a culture of democracy, the aim of which was to decide at European level on the values, attitudes, skills, and knowledge, which should be at the basis of any education system in democratic society, and the ultimate goal being the preparation of citizens to live in a democracy. And so the European Wergeland Center also worked on the elaboration of this reference framework and is now very much involved in the implementation phase of this framework. Then another initiative that was more practice-oriented was a joint initiative that we carried out with the European Commission with regard to the controversial issues in the classroom. And the results of both initiatives, the first one on the reference framework and the controversial issues, how to deal with them, both these results are now perfectly integrated in the third initiative, the training module that we are launching today. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Villano. Now you have heard since the beginning of this launch that both Anna and I have said repeatedly how our manual and other products are something that have been prepared by teachers for teachers. And it's, of course, very nice of us European officials to say so, but I think it's about time that we test this claim with somebody who can really speak on behalf of teachers with authority and legitimacy. So I'd like to welcome Haldis, Holst, Deputy Secretary General of the Education International. I'd like to ask you, Haldis, we said teaching professionals, teachers every day in schools across Europe, across the world, are facing ethical dilemmas on different difficult issues on everyday basis, which have been also presented by Angelos in his presentation. How much, in your view, the tools such as Signposts can be of assistance for teachers facing these situations to become more aware of their own positions and what they bring to the classroom as part of their, let's call it, luggage?
Well, thank you very much, Matthias. And the short answer to that is that I think that manuals and support materials like this are very important. But to elaborate a bit more about why, if we go back to the mandate of what a teacher is supposed to do and what education is, and we can go even further back than the turn of the century, and I can go back to the ILO UNESCO recommendation on the status of teachers, which has some guiding principles of what education is. And among other things, it says that it's very important that education contributes to peace, to understanding, tolerance, friendship among nations, among racial and religious groups. So it's right at the core of what we are supposed to do. And it is, I think, one of the most, or part of the most complicated part of the mandate of teaching is to address issues that can be controversial, but also are very value-based and very important to the individual, our students, their families, communities, and for them and their identity and who they are. So it means that as a professional, that we need to have the support to be able to deliver this part of education. We need to have the tools to be able to deliver this part of education. And we need to have a professional community where we can discuss and further develop. Religion has been a part of education since the beginning of education. It has had different roles also within Europe. So this, can you say, dilemma of how close connection there should be between religion and education has always been there. European countries have gone in different directions and have chosen different solutions along the way. But I think what we have in common in Europe is that we now, to a large extent, have very heterogeneous societies where our students will have different connection to religion at home. What teachers also experience is that it's very blurry, the connection to what is religion, what is culture, what is politics. But what they have in common is that when they come together or individually, they can become controversial if you voice something in a classroom that is different from what a student hears at home. And to be able to enter that room, you need support, and that's where the tools come in again. But at the core of it is that the tools can support, but they must not be mandatory, because it's about the professional freedom, the academic freedom of a teacher to evaluate what is the contextual right thing to do in my classroom. And then they need to be aware of what is controversial, what is not controversial. What is the community, as we were told here, that my students live in? And how can I approach it in a way where I respect the students, but at the same time do push towards opening their minds? Because you cannot create understanding without understanding the other and understand their values. This represents the most complicated part of the teaching mission, and we know that people are attacked for it all over the world. In Education International, we have members that have lost their jobs for doing their job, who have been imprisoned for doing their job. And worst case was what happened to Samuel Paty, killed for doing your job. So it's extremely important that teachers feel they have the professional support, but also the moral support of society, in your local society, and this bigger society. And in this respect, it's very important the work Council of Europe does, because Council of Europe has a value base that supports this part of teaching. And this teaching manual is one of the support materials from the Council of Europe that both signals that this is important, that we support you teachers, but also gives the practical tool that you can choose to use in the right context in your classroom and in your school. So yes, it can be a great support.
Thank you, Haldis, for this very inspiring intervention and for reminding us that, yes, in fact, teachers are first responders. Many situations we have in our society, and the importance of supporting them both professionally and morally. And then I would like to move to Peter Schreiner, because Peter Schreiner, you were part of the group which developed Signposts, the one policy and practice. And as Villano said, we started that work doing a survey of the situation in Europe concerning intercultural education and the religion and non-religious dimensions of it. After we developed that, could you say that the tool you were part of introducing brought some new perspectives to the debates about on religions and non-religious convictions in educational settings? Would you say that it did, and if so, how?
Thank you, Anna. This is an exciting moment because it documents that the process where Signposts and also this teaching manual is part of is a continuing process. So also Signposts was not a final product, but it should encourage developments. And it's very good that it exists in 13 languages because language matters when it comes to education. So in that sense, I think this is one point that the material that is produced and organized by the Council of Europe should be available in different languages. Otherwise, it will not be recognized in a specific context. Yes, I would say there was some new perspectives, and I can say it only for the German situation, which is my situation. We organized a national consultation in cooperation with the University of Hildesheim. And this was one of the few events where those who are dealing with intercultural education and those who are dealing with religious education came together and discussed this issue. And I think this is very important that we go beyond our own expertise and exchange with others who see the need to enlarge the understanding what culture and intercultural education means. And another effect was that Signpost was recognized in an academic debate. I would say it's a very well received document now for a specific policy of the Council of Europe, but also of the Wergeland Center. And it helps to reflect on an own perspective how to deal with the religious dimension in intercultural education. And the third point I want to say is that also the European Forum for Teachers of Religious Education has used Signposts to discuss the different elements and the components of the concept to work on what do we have in common and what do we have in difference and how can we collaborate together. So I would say Signposts was a very important step, and I'm really pleased that this process goes on. And I found a very important sentence on the last page of the teacher manual that says, give more power to education for building a better future. I think this is really a crucial point, that also in the political institutions who deal for democracy, human rights, and the rule of law, education should be given a space and an opportunity to contribute to this big task on how to live together in the European context.
Thank you, Peter. Coming now to the second co-author of the manual, Dr. Kevin O'Grady. Kevin, I remember I started my preschool education actually in late 60s in Italy, and I remember that Catholic nuns were sending me almost every day home, where I was accosting my agnostic parents and screaming at them that we'll all end up in hell because we're not going for the Holy Service. But we know that, and they handle that actually quite well. But then things have changed, of course, since the late 60s. But we know that Signposts touch on some dilemmas, frictions between freedom of religion and beliefs and freedom of expressions. And parents are particularly engaged sometimes. So how is it that we can educate about religions and non-religious worldviews in a way distinct but compatible with religious nurture?
Thanks, Matthias, for your question and your reflections on the nuns there. I'd offer 3 points for consideration, really, I think. Firstly, and probably this would be the most important one, that all parties concerned, whether teachers, school leaders, pupils, parents, local faith groups, have to be clear that the purpose of such teaching about religious and non-religious worldviews is to build understanding rather than to press pupils to adopt beliefs or practices from the religious or non-religious worldviews being taught about. That would be the first point. Secondly, I'd say that in any case, this attitude of seeking to understand others ought to be compatible with many religious and philosophical views on the purpose of life and how to live it well. And then thirdly, I'd want to make a point about the nature of democratic societies, as well as our various religious or non-religious identities that we may have. We all share an identity as citizens, these societies, whether this is at national or European level. And it's part of the meaning of citizenship, as I see it, to develop understanding of and communication with other citizens who may have differences in outlook from you. So again, I think to sum up, it's important to base the education in the purpose of understanding, and importantly to include opportunities for dialogue, both in and beyond the classroom.
Thank you, Kevin, for your reflections. And now Matthias and I, we are receiving questions from you, from the participants. So my colleagues has delivered some to me. And I have a question for Angelos, it seems. And it says here, how much does the training module differ from the Teaching Controversial Issues manual? And also we know that the module has been implemented at the University of Athens in the Faculty of Theology. Any feedback you've got there?
Yes, thank you, Anna. Signposts does not invent the earth. It deals with things that already exist, but it addresses them. And I think that this is the need. Religion is there, and religious issues are there. The thing is how to address them. And let me also say how to address them in religious education systems that have a mono-religion way. This is why Signposts goes into intercultural education and works there. So it is about everyone, not only the faithful or non-faithful people and those distinctions, but all teachers. And it's presented as a tool on how to address those issues, not only in the classroom, but also in school life. Because what is a big need is the school policy about religion. So yes, dealing with religious issues can be a controversial issue, but it's not only this. It starts before that. It starts by acknowledging that religion is something that is at school anyway, and we don't necessarily have to see it through the glasses of our own, of even our country's colors. So this is the distinction from controversial issues. It can be controversial. It's not controversial necessarily. And the sooner you deal with that, the less controversial is, because as it was said already, we don't deal with that in order to support a religion or not support a religion or to whatever, but in order to understand, acknowledge, and deal with those issues. And this makes it different from controversial issues. Now, this is the module is something that we are being working for years, and it was very natural that on the way we had discussions and dealing with the issues and things like that. So One of the professors that is in the chatting room now, Marios Liagis Koukounaras, who is a professor at the University of the Faculty of Theology of the University of Athens, has used the Signpost module last year in his master's course. It was his textbook, so he followed it chapter by chapter. And there can be opinions and everything about it, but he went one step further. One of the PhD students that he has, this student has a research which is about the intercultural competences of religion education teachers. So again, the module is used in this research. So we have in the past, it was used as a module in the master's course. It is used in the research in a PhD. And for the future, we dream and we organize to have online or face-to-face training using the module. This will be within the framework of the lifelong learning of the university. If it can be in English, it will be presented to a bigger audience. This is what has happened up to now.
Thank you very much, Angelos. We have about 10 minutes left. I think it's excellent that we can take some more questions from the participants. I have one coming from Knut from Oslo, and it's the signpost is about managing responding to diversity. His question is, and I would guess it's either for Kevin or Angelos, it would be very good to hear some reflections from the creators of the model on the diversity or lack of diversity in the group that has developed this material. So, either one of you.
It's a very good question. I saw it in the chat. Diversity can, of course, mean different things. I guess that we were conscious at the time that we were an all-male group, all-European group. There were interesting kind of differences and nuances of difference of worldview between the four writers, I think, though it was a very, very sound, very collegial, very professional team that worked very effectively together. All male, but with a couple of very strong female voices more in the background. One of whom is with us in the person of Anna this morning. I think that it's difficult to know, and that perhaps time will tell us something about the effect of the composition of the group on the content of the module, which may not be an entirely satisfactory answer, but I think that's where I'm at with it just now. I don't know what you're thinking about this is, Angelos.
Well, I have a mathematical answer and a philosophical one. The mathematical answer could be that every member of our group had a different religious or non-religious worldview. But the philosophical one is that what we try to overcome by Signposts and the model is exactly this label. What does it mean if I have a religion? Does it mean that I'm a representative of somebody? Who? Which kind of representative? The conservative part, the sentimental part, the traditional part. Am I a radical or not? So saying that we were from different religious or non-religious worldviews does not actually say something, but it says that we were in the common effort to overcome this obstacle. Because what we need is teacher tools, that no matter what is my religion, to be able to give equal participation and equal education to my students, no matter what. So yes, we thought about the different things. We are still white Europeans, but we tried to work on that direction, hoping that we will not find somebody who feels excluded from our work. Thank you.
Thank you, Angelos. And maybe this is a question to discuss in next session. We're talking about next steps. And you did have a Latin American at the back, so not only European. A question to you from our participants. It says, my impression as a teacher educator in Scandinavia is that issues of religious diversity is downplayed in the context of bigger debates and issues discussed in educational and in schools. Is that true? Does it need more attention?
You know, I think that's a very interesting question and observation. And I think I want to go back to what Angelo said, that teaching about these issues don't need to be controversial. And I think that's where some of the challenge lies, that if we defined everything as controversial, it also makes it more difficult to go into. Now, some issues are controversial, but it's about also acknowledging that religious diversity is actually the norm in very many societies. It's the everyday life, and it's about addressing and respecting and training teachers to be able to do that. Teaching that is based on the identity of the individual student. But there's also the difficulty that so many of these issues are politicized, so that they're covered up, you know, and of course, as soon as you play the terrorism card, it becomes very complicated and you get a debate that can be derailed and is about something else and not really about the religious part of it. When you start wrapping it up as this is our culture, this is our values, these are our family values, which is often the narrative when it comes to like mentioning homosexuality, then you are sort of pushing the teachers out, or you're just putting it out that this is a non-topic. And in that way, you are putting it on the sidelines. So I think it's very important to keep that teachers keep putting it on the agenda, what is important for my students to prepare them for the future I'm supposed to prepare them for in their society, and to keep also their professional communities discuss these dilemmas, be brave and put them on the agenda yourself and say, I need support, I need to discuss this, I need you to support me in how I deal with this in my classroom because it's important for my students. And remember, it's the loyalty of the students and their right to education that should be at the core of everything we do, whether it's controversial, difficult, or whatever. We owe them that we put it on the agenda and that we deal with it and don't avoid it.
Thank you very much, Haldis. Thank you to all the participants for this initial exchange and contribution. Sorry, there was a little accident behind me. These things happen. We're coming to the second part of this morning's session, where we'll be identifying needs and next steps. I think we'll also need some technical instructions from Øystein for that. But Anna, will you be taking over this part of the session? That much from me and from Strasbourg.
Thank you, Matthias, and yes, I will. Thank you for a very inspiring discussion to all of you, and thank you for accepting our challenge to go live with quite difficult questions. So let's now move to a bit of a more interactive session where we really would like to invite you, and we are 107 persons at the moment, and we have been having a very active discussion on the Q&A part of our the screen. I would like to invite you to tell us what the priorities will be. We are looking into what we would like to do from particularly Wergeland-centered perspectives, and we have some ideas. We have some ideas concerning capacity building, and we have some ideas concerning how to make this tool more available and the promotion of it. But before we go forward, we would like to invite you to participate with us, to tell us your priorities, to tell us your suggestions for what things you need in the future. So what would you like to learn more about? What topics you think are more interesting for you? We will go now and open a poll. And in this poll, we would use the results of the poll to elaborate some workshops, online workshops that will come in the next months. So let's experiment a bit. And I ask you, of course, Kevin and Angelos, to stay with us, because you as authors, you will be invited to comment on the polls and the progressions and the questions and so on. And we will also take up some of the questions that were posed and we didn't have answers to, time to answer as well. So if we move on to the poll, you will see soon on the right of your screen a poll opening. Is the one with an icon. It says a new poll is live. You will see that. If you open that, you will find 9 topics that corresponds with the 9 chapters of the material. Please choose one, the one that it's closer to your priorities. Unfortunately, you can only choose one. Technically, we cannot change it. Scroll down and then vote. We give you some quiet moments. Please do so. Let's start. And if you have some suggestions and other questions, please post it on the Q&A. We will also consider this when organizing these workshops.
I shouldn't really comment on the results as they're coming through, but I can see quite a bit of support for one area in particular.
Okay, I think that now most of participants have voted. So Angelos and Kevin, what are we seeing now with concerning the results?
There are more coming.
There are more coming.
Do we have some time to offer for this?
Biden is like the American.
You can ask some other questions, and in the meantime, participants can continue voting.
Yes, you're right.
But should we put a kind of time limit on the voting so that we can begin to discuss it shortly?
I think we can. It's a big percentage I can see already that have already voted. So just to use this precious time, because we don't have much left, it seems that there are 2 or 3 of the topics which are on the front running. The one on pedagogical approaches for understanding religions and non-religious worldviews are having about 30%. The classroom as a safe space for dealing with these issues is quite is a very sizable percentage. And the last one is the one on human rights issues and the dilemmas Matthias were also talking about, the freedom of religions and belief, the rights of children and the rights of parents, and the rights of freedom of expression, so exploring these dilemmas as well. Your reaction, Angelos, Kevin?
Well, my first comment would be that if most of the votes go to pedagogical approaches for understanding religious and non-religious worldviews, this shows the need itself. This is what we need as teachers in the classroom. Because the tricky thing about religion at school is that either there is a religion or there is no religion in a world that most of the kids, of the students, at least in Greece, do not count religion as one of their interests. It's not that they're pro or against. It's not in their way of thinking. They have not dealt with it in their everyday life. But still, there are things about religion. For example, there was a question in the chat saying that, what do you do with a birthday? Everyone celebrates birthday. What do you do with religious days? I mean, there are the dominant religious days that many people feel that it's very natural to deal with that in school. But it's very interesting on the other side that in the US, for example, there are not Christmas cards anymore. There are holidays cards. And there are not Christmas wishes, but there are holidays wishes. But this happens not for all religions represented at school or being present at school. So what we need is, I think, 2 things, and I talk as a teacher now. I need tools and ways to feel safe when dealing with those. Because in my educational context, the main issue to deal with is not the school, the ministry, and the education. It is the parents, the religions, this part. So yes, I think that pedagogical approaches is a priority.
I think what I'd like to do is build on those comments of Angelos's, endorse them, make some suggestions based on the chapters in the module, and then invite some comment via the Q&A or the chat about whether this is heading in the right direction or whether these workshop outlines would kind of meet the needs of people who are here with us this morning or not. So I'm thinking, firstly, that some work during the, could be 2, I guess, workshops on chapter 1 would be a good starting point. Chapter 1 is like a basis for the whole module, so its contents and activities might be quite useful at an early stage. So chapter 1 raises questions like why religious and non-religious worldviews within democratic intercultural education. It highlights competences for democratic culture, including openness to others, valuing diversity, knowledge and understanding of different religious and non-religious worldviews. It asks teachers to consider what our own values are and to do some research into our own local contexts, for example, the migration histories into our own localities. So activities include teachers building up a mind map, including impact of the local migration and cultural diversity factors on our schools, practices our schools have to address them, and implications for teaching. And then there's an activity where teachers draft and then redraft a letter in groups to a group of parents who've requested withdrawal of children from any learning about Islam. And what you're being asked to do here is kind of clarify and outline yours and your school's values and position in all of these regards. So then, skipping across to chapter 4, where we're directly addressing competence and didactics for understanding religions, that we could broaden that to include non-religious worldviews also. The chapter is looking at two different styles of pedagogy, or two different pedagogical approaches, interpretive and dialogical. So we're aiming to equip teachers to equip pupils to understand one another's point of view, to develop awareness of our own points of view, both as teachers and pupils, again, developing discussion skills, developing appreciation of diversity and other democratic culture competences. So the training activities, so to look at a summary account of some teaching that I did to 12 and 13-year-old pupils about Islam, based on the 3 principles of the interpretive approach: representation, interpretation, reflexivity, to highlight where in the extract each principle appears, and then plan a lesson of your own on a different topic or for a different age group based on the same principles, and then to share and discuss your plans. So that as part of a workshop, we could kind of guide you through that activity and take your feedback on it. Another activity is to get into groups and to try out some of Julia Ipgrave's dialogical approach activities. So there's a man-eating tiger scenario that you get into groups and kind of discuss and act out, taking different roles. Should this man-eating tiger be shot is the question to discuss. One of the roles is a bereaved father, another is a conservationist, another is a government official. Or you take turns to chair a discussion about a provocative statement. For example, there's no life after death, trying to include as many diverse kind of bases for answers as you possibly can. So the poll is making me think about structuring some workshops around this kind of content and activity. And I'm wondering what participants think, and whether, Anna, in the chat or Q&A, we have feedback yet on whether these approaches could be valuable for people or not, or what other suggestions might be.
I have to say that I see a lot of questions coming up now. Just to tell people that if we are not able to, you are not able to address them, we'll consider them when preparing the capacity building activity. So please send in suggestions and so on. We'll really look into that, and we'll provide a very important feedback for us. So we tailor-made something that is really suiting the needs of people. But I also am having questions coming in on my phone, and I would like to take this opportunity, because I have questions for Haldis and Villano and Angelos and Kevin. So one question for each of you, so you can think. The first one is coming from Angela, and it says, thank you for your presentations. I would like to ask you 2 questions, and probably this is for Kevin and Angelos. How you have defined religion, the framework of your work. Second, is it possible, and how it is possible, to adopt the signpost approach, the framework of a state system based on education religiously oriented? This is one. Another one is for Haldis. Following up Angelo's point here that what it means to live a religious life is not only one thing, it is not only about beliefs in the propositional sense. Therefore, religious education is also not always a cognitive matter. What particularly issues might this raise for teachers? And another one for Villano. Is there any plans for developing materials for teachers to use with the students, Villano?
Who? Your microphone is off, Anna.
How have you defined religion in the context of Signposts?
Well, we follow the definition of religion from the recommendation, which is an appendix of the original Signposts, the first one. And Villano already mentioned that it is not only a part of the cultural identity, not only a part of culture. The thing is not how we explain religion, but to be able to approach the way that the believer sees religion. I say it again. The thing is not to have the right things, to transfer them to the teachers so that they gain one opinion about things. The thing is how acknowledging how diverse those things are, to find a method, a way in order to deal with them, regardless what is the perception of each one of the religious groups around. So here we talk about the educational and pedagogical use of dealing with religion, which means that yes, religion is a part of the cultural identity. Not only, let's see how the members of the religions or churches or mosques or feel about that, and how can we cope with that, having in mind that we're based on citizenship, we're based on human rights, and we want to live together in a democratic society. I know this is not an answer, but I try through that to say that it's not yes or no, it's not this or that. It is having this and that and others that we don't know, how to cope with this, how to feel more safe to enter to that, knowing that there is no one answer to the questions. So the solution is not a religious one, the solution is how to cope with those issues.
Thank you, Kevin. Do you have anything to add?
I could attempt, I think, to answer the second question that came in about what happens in a country where religious nurture, is the kind of primary aim of religious education in the system. One naturally has to accept the right of parents to organize education for the children in line with their own convictions, whatever those convictions may be. I still feel that as a kind of parallel element within the religious education curriculum, or perhaps this could happen elsewhere in the curriculum through social studies, through citizenship education, some attention to intercultural issues is a vital component of any person's citizenship, nurture, identity, upbringing. And in the light of that, I think it would be important for schools who have quite a nurturing, faith-orientated philosophy of religious education to look to develop those opportunities for young people in parallel with that, whether it's within the same subject or within a different kind of curriculum area.
Thank you. Haldis, I read a question to you coming from participants talking about the diversity of what religion means to different persons and the issues that may raise for teachers. What are your reflections on that?
Well, it's a very multidimensional question, and I think that in a way also represents the complexity of it. And again, I want to go back to what something Angelo said earlier when he was talking about the Greek young people don't necessarily have an awareness of being a religious person, but they still have a cultural heritage that is influenced by the main religion that they have grown up with around them, if I understood him correctly. And for me, that indicates why these topics, it's not about religious education. Many education systems don't want us to do religious education. It is about creating knowledge about religion, what they mean for people, and how they influence our societies to build understanding and respect. There's not one solution how to do it. It can be presented as an interdisciplinary skill that is cross-cutting across subjects, or it can be dealt with within a specific subject that is called about religion, or you call it different things. But I think it's important to understand that's this, because the starting point must always be the students. And you may want to also raise awareness among your students that although they may not identify as a religious person, they are still influenced by religious practices and cultures around them. They define them. Even here I'm sitting in Norway, so how our whole school year is built around Christian religious days. I work in Belgium. They have different days because, it's the difference between Catholic, Protestant. But so it defines the framework around their education, and just building an awareness of that yes, we're off at Easter and we're off at Christmas, and there's a reason for that has influenced you. It doesn't mean you need to be a religious person, but it is part of who you are. So it's not a very detailed answer, but I think just the awareness of these dilemmas and how they define our students in different ways is a very important starting point.
Thank you, Haldis. Thank you, Haldis. And maybe we have 1 minute for you, Villano, for a big question with a very short answer, please. What are the plans?
But in 20 years of work, we have already done this. We have also in my library, I have other books with materials for working with students in the classroom with regard to all these themes that we are discussing now. The approach taken by the Council of Europe was not to design and impose, kind of activities or set of activities because of the diversity of education system, because of the diversity of national context, local context, even at the level of neighborhood, is very difficult to give to the community of teachers ready-made recipes. We have been working instead on inspiring best practices or inspiring existing practices, because we didn't want to call them neither best practices or innovative practices, but existing practices that different teachers in different schools, in different contexts, in different countries are already doing. All these resources are free online in our website, and we are also developing online learning hub with all these resources in member states. I think that our sector on capacity building in the education sector and other sectors are already working on this. But I see this more as for teachers themselves and for trainers themselves to adapt and to have their own ideas and to adapt what we say in the manual or the signpost through activities that can fit better to their local context.
Okay, thank you, Villano. And so just maybe it's time for us to wrap up. I see that the poll has given us very interesting feedback, so thank you for that. So we need to work more on pedagogical approaches, on the issue of creating safe spaces and the human rights dilemmas connected to some of the issues we discussed today. And with that, I would just like to mention that we, Villano, talk about Council of Europe plans and what they are doing. And we, from the Wergeland Center side, we have already decided to continue working on this. And there are several things on the pipeline I would like to mention. The first one is this, we are going to have a series of interactive workshops in different languages, not only in English, and we will offer translation as well to open up to several professionals, maybe later in the day so more teachers can participate. Sorry for doing that in the morning. We are also working on translations. As Peter Schreiner said, language matters, we know. We have already, besides the English version, a Greek version, an Albanian version, the Norwegian, Russian, Serbian, and some of the Balkan countries as well is coming soon. So we are working on that already. And last but not least, we are going to digitalize the material because at the moment it's only it's a PDF or a printed version. We are going to digitalize it to make it more user-friendly for you. So please we will keep you posted. Stay with us, and hopefully we will invite you in not too many weeks to be part of more concrete interactive sessions for continue working on that. And I wonder if Michael Remmert is with us. Is he?
Yes, I am.
Then the floor is yours, Michael.
Thank you very much. I hope you can see me. So it's my task to close this session. If you can see me or not, it doesn't really make a difference. I am the head of the Education Policy Division, for those who haven't met me yet. And I think this was a very valuable session. We heard how the original Signposts publication has been applied in practice, be it in discussions between teachers in their associations, or be it as textbooks in universities. And it is, of course, very good that the Signposts can now be rolled out into teacher training. We have heard by the speakers and also reflected in questions and the poll that teachers really do need practical tools to help them to confidently address these issues, controversial or not, in the classroom, how they can do it in the classroom, and how this can also come into the policy of schools of how to address issues of religious and non-religious matters. I would like to thank all of you for having participated. First of all, of course, the panelists and the moderators, but also all those who made this meeting happen behind the scenes in the European Wergeland Center, in the run-up to the meeting and during this meeting. And I think we can all say that there were no technical flaws whatsoever, which doesn't happen very often. So thank you very much for that. And then, of course, I would like to thank all participants, all of you out there. You were more than 100 at the peak of this session, and we hope that this was a worthwhile experience for you. As Anna said, please come and bring your suggestions to the Wergeland Center in order to help calibrate and fine-tune the teacher training. If ever your questions were not sufficiently answered in this session, please continue the dialogue with the Council of Europe and the Wergeland Center. So thank you very much to all of you, and please do keep in touch. Thank you very much, and I would think this will end this very interesting and successful meeting. Have a good day.